Welcome to episode 10 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I am your host, Matthew Benko. In this episode titled Challenge Accepted, we delve into an incredible military journey and personal transformation with Connie Whalen, a remarkable individual who started her military career at a young age. Connie embarked on her military career at just 17, enlisting in the Navy as a yeoman before transitioning into the role of a Navy counselor, serving with incredible dedication for 20 years. Her story is one of perseverance, facing challenges, and finding balance amidst service and family. Connie candidly shares the hurdles of being a female in a male-dominated field and the sacrifices of working motherhood, highlighting the importance of family support and work-life balance. We explore her reflections on accepting medical retirement and rediscovering herself post-service. Connie emphasizes the power of acknowledging, accepting, and planning for a different future. In our conversation, we discussed the significance of sacrifice in parenting and relationships, understanding children's struggles, and respecting individual differences. Connie also recently completed a graduate program in nonprofit management from the University of Notre Dame, closely collaborating with the Travis Manion Foundation for her thesis. Join us as Connie reflects on the value of asking meaningful questions and embracing incremental steps towards personal growth. This is Acknowledge to Action podcast, where we embrace the journey. Connie, thank you so much for being here today to the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I'm really excited that you're here today. We go back a few years. We've worked together with the Travis Manion Foundation as Character Does Matter mentors and as friends over the years. So I'm really honored to have you here, and I'm really excited. So thanks for being here, Connie.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to go on this journey with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is all about your journey, and we're going to have a good conversation. I do have some behind the scenes information as far as where I think your journey is going to go. We're going to talk about, but we're just going to have a good conversation, and I'm really looking forward to this and sharing your story and your experience with our listeners today.
Okay, great. Looking forward to it.
Oh, great. Well, let's just jump right into it then. So, Connie, hey, we're going to kick it off with the question I've asked all my guests to date so far. And, this is all about embracing the journey, hearing your experience, hearing your story. So can you take us through your military journey from the moment you became involved with the military to where you are today? Highlight a couple key moments, challenges, and transformations along the way.
Yeah, sure. So I joined the military when I was 17. I was a baby right out of high school. I went to a private all-girls Catholic school. It was super strict, and I thought that the military would be less strict. So I left home at 17. My parents had to sign the paperwork for me, and I just dove right in. So I guess I joined as a yeoman. There was very few jobs that were available for women at that time, and so that's what I went to school for. And shortly after that, probably 2 or 3 years in, I realized this is not where I want to be. I was attached to a subtender in Norfolk, and I thought ship life is not for me, and being a yeoman is not for me. So
that's the first I heard of yeoman. Can you talk about it? So you went into the Navy, and then you went in 17, and then you talk about yeoman. Well, what is that?
I mean, I basically, it's the equivalent to a secretary. That was just my point of view at that point, because I had such a limited experience. But as I've grown in my military career, I realized how important yeomen really are. Male, female, indifferent. They're the people that are in charge of taking care of your record and documenting everything. So they are so important to the mission on a whole. But as a kid, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, I thought, oh, it's just a secretary. But in fact, that's not what it turned out to be. But in that juncture of my life, I wanted to do something different, right? I had a recruiter that talked me into doing that. I'm sure it was to make numbers. I wound up being a recruiter later on in my career, so I understand where that recruiter was coming from. But shortly into my Navy career, I had somebody talk to me about what homesteading looks like and what the TAR program was, which is a temporary active reserve. So you're on active duty, and then what Navy counselors looked like and what they did. And that was super intriguing to me. So I took a bump backwards in rank and applied for the NC program, homesteading program, which really just keeps you more local to where you live, right? So I was pretty much stationed up and down the East Coast. So I always had a good support system in that. And yeah, so I changed rates to a Navy counselor, and that's how I grew in my career. And as an NC, it is counseling people through a recruiting process. Some are civilians, some are in other military branches. And I specifically worked with ages 26 to 39. So I didn't go into high schools or anything like that, or really
Okay.
even colleges. They were individuals that were established in their career. We would get the breakdown from Congress of where the gaps were and who we could technically hire or recruit that year, and then stick them in a billet according to what their civilian life was, or even maybe somebody that was already in the Air Force and wanted to cross rate into the Navy. We would find a spot for them that was something
Oh,
that
so,
they
so
liked.
like the prior service. So I know from Air Force, like if we brought in somebody from, we would go, oh, their prior service, and we would go through
Exactly.
the motions, and to acknowledge being a yeoman and how important that is. In the Air Force world, we call that the Commander Support Staff, CSS. And they
Okay.
are so absolutely critical. And yeah, as a 17-year-old, even your first enlistment, you're like, okay, yeah, it is what it is. But you don't realize how important and valuable that position is.
Yeah, I
Because,
agree with that. I mean,
yeah,
being brand new in the military, right? Especially as a kid, you have no frame of reference. You have really, you have no experience.
yeah.
So it's easy to judge, but you're drinking information like through a fire hose,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You're
Yeah,
trying to figure
absolutely.
out who is who and what is what. And yeah, it's an interesting experience. But I'll tell you what, my first enlistment, every single day, I'm like, I'm not reenlisting. I'm not reenlisting. Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
can't wait till this contract is over. And then here I was 20 plus years later, um, you know, retiring, and we can talk about that later. But
Wow.
unfortunately, I was medically retired from the military, and I fought tooth and nail to stay in. I loved it so much and loved what I did for a living. And yeah, just God had a different plan for me, and I needed to embrace that. And here I am on the back end of that, and I'm
Yeah.
doing great, and I'm super confident. But at that time, which was I really had a tough time with that.
With
Had
the
a tough time
transition piece.
transitioning from,
Yeah.
yeah, from being active duty and everything I knew to now being a civilian like that. It's a it's an interesting transition.
Absolutely is. And there's a lot of common, what's the word I'm trying to think of? There's a lot we have in common as veterans, right? Regardless of what branch of service.
Mhm.
But there's one thing in particular that is almost that's very, very similar, and that is transition, how we deal with readjustment. So whether we do a one-term enlistment or we do a 20 plus year, to the retirement, it is very hard to anticipate what that readjustment and that transition is going to be like. And it is, for a lot of us, a lifelong journey. And that's a big component of this acknowledge to action piece, is to kind of embrace that journey and understand that piece. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, and how you manage that, from 2009 to current, because I know with us being involved with the Travis Manion Foundation, that's a huge piece, but that's something, I know that's going to be a great part of our conversation today. As far as with that, I just wanted to acknowledge that and highlight that. But before we go there, can you talk a little bit about how you found the Navy? I always am interested in hearing what attracted the individual to the branch of service. Was it a line of sight? Was it family influence? It's always interesting to hear how did you find the Navy, or did the Navy find you? You know.
That's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both.
Hmm.
So my grandfather was in World War II, youngest PT boater. So he had a similar experience of being super young and finding the service. Obviously, our situations were very different. We joined at very, very different times, but he influenced me, just the respect that I had for him. Um, but opposite of that, when I told my family that I was joining the military, I can speak this now because I'm a
Yeah.
mom, but my mom just cried, right?
Yeah.
Um, because the way that they grew up, obviously, was in the Vietnam era. So through
Mm,
their lens, any job was threatening to the individual,
yeah.
right? So that was interesting to navigate. But at 17 years old, I, I didn't care. I was
Yeah.
just going away. You know what I mean? And I remember, we were on a hold pattern in boot camp until everybody got there. And I think we had one phone call for 5 minutes within that week, that first week. There was no such thing as cell phones back there. I joined in 1989, right? So you're literally waiting in line for a payphone kind of a thing. And I remember my first phone call saying, I made a mistake. Somebody needs to get me out of here. This
Yeah,
is
such
not what I
shock.
want to do.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
complete culture shock. But in hindsight, you can see, wow, like you really appreciate where you came from
Hmm.
when you don't have that support and that background. It really is as a culture shock. But when you're laying in bed at night after being beat up during the day, right,
Yeah.
you find all of the good things that you had at home. And really, what a gift it was to go to a private all-girls school, the sacrifices that my parents made for me. But when you're in that and you're a kid, I don't think you understand the benefit of that,
Yeah.
right? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, it makes absolute sense. 'Cause, well, at that age, for all of us, across the spectrum, male, female, whatever, we're going through so much physically, emotionally, mentally, cognitively, all that stuff. And it's hard to see the forest through the trees, I guess, is I think
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get at is, yeah, you don't see things clearly in the moment. But as you have those experiences, especially something as significant being in basic, well, what is Navy called? Boot camp or basic? I don't know. I
Boot
mean,
camp. Yeah,
boot
boot
camp,
camp.
yeah. Air Force too. It's like, boot camp, baby. We just kind of borrow off of
Yeah.
different. But so basic training in general is a literally in your face sort of shock system. um,
Yes.
and for me, and I think this is more of a broad stroke statement, but I think for most, it puts you in a position to appreciate where you just came from, and
Mhm.
in some ways where you're headed too. It's definitely a game changer and a life changer. Regardless of what you end up doing in the military,
Yeah, I agree with
is
that.
it just so I absolutely understand and empathize. I went in when I was 17 too, so it's like, yeah, you're like, what am I doing here? But then you realize why you're here, and it's in hindsight, it's easy to account for that and acknowledge that. But in the moment, you're just like, whoa, I just
Yeah.
want to take it day by day, or
Yeah.
sometimes minute by minute. If I could get through the next
Yeah.
10 minutes, or if I could get through the next few minutes, I could get through anything. So,
Yeah. I agree with that. But what a great experience to have at 17 years old, right?
yeah.
To be introduced to people that you would normally never meet, right? As a matter of fact, speaking of boot camp, so I joined in 1989, so it's been quite some time. But just this past year, we were able to. My company was K002, so this is a good thing with social media. I was able to put something out there to invite to a group, and I searched for people that were in a boot camp to
Oh, that's awesome.
participate in that group. So we did. We had like out of 83 girls, we probably got 40 on this chat, which is great. And then last summer, we met up at somebody's house in Cancun, and we hadn't seen each other for I don't know 30 plus years, right?
Oh, geez, I
And
wonder. That's it.
and
That's awesome.
it was so interesting to see that now, we're all in our 50s and how things just come flooding back to you, right? Like the
Yeah.
things that happened in 1989, right? And it was like we didn't skip a beat. And that's one of the things I love about the military is that, I mean, I haven't seen these women in forever and I would still like take a bullet for them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super cool to see. And again, it's one of the reasons why I love TMF so much and give them so much of my time is just I feel that fellowship that is
Mm,
there with the
yeah.
military. I don't know if you can find that anywhere else.
It's very, if you do, it's very difficult. It's a combination of difficulty meets luck meets circumstance, because that's it's tough to find. It really is. And I think, from my own experience, when you're transitioning and you're like, oh, I'm getting out, I'm going to go conquer the world, or I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But then you realize, whoa, I'm missing something here. And you can't quite really put your finger on it. And
Yeah.
with Travis Manion Foundation, it helped. I'm like, wow, this was a critical missing piece.
Yeah.
that camaraderie piece and that connection and, all the stuff that comes with it, giving back to the community. So yeah, I just, this is why I'm really excited for this conversation, because the common bond between military service and then, now social service through Travis Manion. So that's pretty
Absolutely.
cool. So you did 20 years. So you retired. You retired from the Navy. You did 20 years. Where did the Navy all take you? And is that where you started your family? Did your family grow with you? Talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So I swung in and out of reserve and active duty earlier on in my career, right after my first contract. And then shortly after, when I was in a reserve unit, I'm like, I miss it. I
Yeah.
miss it full time. And at that point, my husband and I just started dating. And so I got married on active duty. I have two girls. Chris and I have two girls. They're adults now. One that's almost 25, one that's almost 22. In a couple of weeks, we'll be celebrating our 27th year anniversary.
Oh,
So
congrats.
Chris is
That's
a
awesome.
civilian, and I'm happily married to a civilian through me being in the military. But he's the MVP of our family, just being supportive of my career, being an NC and being on recruiting duty. They're not the typical hours, right? It is 24/7. And a lot of military jobs are like that, but I think it takes a special partner and husband to let
Yeah.
his wife, leave for MEPS, picking up somebody and going to MEPS at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? Or taking phone calls at 11 o'clock at night at the end of the month because your goal's not being met, and all these different people, just I needed to pay attention to. And
Yeah.
his confidence in me and trusting in me really enabled me to have a great career.
Yeah.
And I think if he was a different person, we wouldn't be at this juncture of our life.
Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, to answer your question, I did start my family in the military on active duty. And that was interesting as well. Um, Chris and I had been trying, and I remember, getting pregnant and telling my rank or my recruiter in charge that we were pregnant, and he was less than enthusiastic. I can say that. Um,
Uh,
which it
that's
is
a
what it
very
is.
tactful way. That's a very tactful way of putting it.
Yeah,
Oh,
he didn't use that kind of language. His language was a little bit different. Um,
yeah.
but I was on goal. I was always on goal. Being an NC, you're constantly under the pressure of goal, and
So
I
is that
can
NC? I'm sorry, Con. So NC, that's just a standard recruiter, right? Is that what we, or
no. What
is it a little
recruiters?
bit more? Is it a little bit more involved? Like what? So
Yeah. So
NC, Navy counselor. I think you said that earlier, right? Yeah,
a Navy
Navy counselor.
counselor is, yes, they are career recruiters. So, but
So
recruiting,
when you say career, like that's your rating, or that's what you're in
yes,
for a
yes.
fixed long-term period of time?
A long-term period of time. So,
Oh, okay.
recruiting duty can look all different, right? Like you can be in aviation and take on recruiting duty for a 2-year period or
A
for a
special
3-year
duty
period.
assignment or something like that, where
It's
it's
a
like
special duty
it's a
assignment. Yeah,
controlled tour. Okay.
exactly. And as an NC, it's structured a little bit different. So I knew that this was going to be my career path. I knew that I would be in recruiting
Oh,
for the
okay.
rest of my time in the military. So, and
Interesting. Okay.
And the
I'm tracking
benefits
now.
of yeah, the benefits of that, especially with homesteading, is that you know your area very, very well. You cultivate relationships in your community. So it looks a little different when you are stationed in one place for so long because you really get the community, you're building trust, right?
Hmm.
So say you're recruiting for an intel position, well, you're really building trust with community partners that this person who you're interested in and recruiting might fit great within a reserve component, right? So they're doing intel in the civilian world, and now we have a billet open in a reserve unit that would be a good match. So being a being a homesteading career recruiter really has its advantages, I think.
Okay. Wow, that's I never knew that. That's really awesome. That's another great thing about these conversations is as we pull back the layers, there's generalizations that we kind of have a idea for each branch of service and serve. But
Yeah.
I had no idea that there was like a career recruiter in the Navy. And I'm curious, I'd be curious if other branches are like that, but that sounds like a really good, sustainable way to do business. If you're trying
Yeah.
to recruit and retention and all that piece, that's really good. So how many years did you do that for in the Navy?
So 17-ish.
Wow. Okay. Whoa. Wow.
17-ish. Yeah.
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 Wow. You
And
say it so
in
like,
that,
just 17 years. It's like, yeah, could give or take a few.
yeah, yeah. It really is it's a great way to cultivate trust in your community. Like I love that business model. I mean, I
Yeah.
know we all complain sometimes about the military and the model
Yeah.
and all of that, but for me, that worked out really well. My family could move with me. Now there were some recruiters that were geo bachelors, right, or geo bachelorettes, where their families were in another state because their kids were in school and they didn't want to
Mm.
move. But for me, Chris, my husband, gave me the flexibility with supporting my career, so he and the girls would move with me. Um, so I did a stint in Philly, did a stint in Willow Grove Naval Air Station. Willow Grove was bracked out, and so we
Yeah.
moved to Delaware.
And
And
that's the case, but that's base realignment closure, BRAC, right?
oh yeah, I
Yeah.
should have
Yeah.
said that. Yeah.
That's okay. It's all right.
Yeah. And so then we moved to Delaware and I finished up my career there. And the girls started school down there and Chris stayed home for a couple of years with the kids, which was a
Yeah.
huge sacrifice for him. He put his career on hold. And I don't know, I just think that's applaudable.
It absolutely, we can't, there aren't enough words or accolades or however, what I'm trying to say here is the how critical the family support system is. Spouses all the way to kids. The younger they are, the harder they are to support. But just for them to understand, family is so arguably might be the most important variable in one's career, and how they support it and how you could sustain it. There's just
Yeah,
not enough words to highlight that.
absolutely.
It's really. I know we've had a couple conversations over the years and recently, and how important that how you've when we were talking and getting an idea of what we're going to talk about today, and how you that was a critical piece, and I would that is for a lot of folks. I don't think it's sustainable without having that foundation, that family foundation to support, to adjust and adapt and all that comes
Yeah,
with what comes with the territory of this sort of career.
I agree with that. The same gentleman who was not enthusiastic about
Oh,
my first pregnancy,
uh,
the same gentleman said to me when I checked into that duty station, my first recruiting station, he said to me, "You're going to have to choose between this job and your marriage because surely you will not be able to be successful in both."
oh wow,
Yeah. So good
unbelievable.
encouragement there, but in hindsight, I mean, I didn't understand what I was doing, but really, I was like challenge accepted, right?
That's the
Um,
words were just gonna come out of my mouth. It sounds like you were like challenge accept. That's an awesome. That's what I was thinking. Wow, we're dialed in. Challenge
yeah.
accepted, pal.
Challenge
Let's do
accepted.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think along that journey, while I was in that moment, of course, I was, really upset and just like, "Who do you think you're talking to?" kind of a thing, but in
Yeah,
that challenge accepted mentality, there were a lot of decisions that I needed to make, right? And look, I we're both in the military, so what are you gonna do? Are you going out for drinks after your workday, or are you going home to your family? Am I going
yeah.
home to my husband, right? And there it just those little tiny choices made for a stable career and for a stable marriage.
Mm,
And I think that we're in control of those decisions. And did I get backlash? Oh my gosh, yes, I
yeah.
totally did. Did I want to go out and have drinks with the people that I worked with? Yes, and sometimes I did. But there needed to be a healthy balance. And years into that, I was able to maintain a healthy balance. We never lived in base housing. We always lived off base.
Mhm.
So that was a way for me to compartmentalize work and family. There were a lot of choices along the way that enabled us to have a good marriage and for me to I wish I was a better mom during that time as far as meaning giving my kids more time when they were young.
Yeah.
But it's the nature of the job, right?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
the kids are dealing with separation anxiety and, and stuff like that. But now, it's all good. It all worked out. I think I was able to show my girls the power of commitment and what that looked like.
Hmm.
And also what a strong female looks like. Because it was
Yeah.
not easy being a female in a mostly male career.
Especially in that era too. I mean, we still have a lot of improvement to do, generally speaking. But I imagine from the late 80s, that was right at the peak of we need to make some change, and we need to prove it through our actions.
Yeah.
And we need to demonstrate that. So I can only imagine what that experience was like, because they were creating opportunities, but how equitable were they, and what was the integrity of those options? And I imagine there's a additional set of challenges associated with that for you, and adapting to that and adjusting to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, definitely. And especially being so close to base, right? So
Yeah.
homesteading does maybe have, I wouldn't say disadvantages, but I just gave birth, but I'm a mile away from the base. So, hey, Whalen, can you come in for half a day? Can you do this? Can you do that? And of course, right? Like, I'm part of the team because it's a
Yeah.
team. Right?
Yeah.
Your office is a team. So if I'm not pulling my weight, somebody else has to pull my weight. So of course the guilt of, hey, I can't take 6 weeks off. I know I have an infant, but I need to help goal, right?
Yeah.
Help make goal. And I was on bed rest with both of my kids and with a computer on my lap in bed.
Wow.
um, and that was a lot of my doing. I wanted to make sure that I was pulling my own weight, and I
Hmm.
also wanted to see our zone succeed. And I knew that I have trust with a lot of community partners that I was able to help our team out in a certain way that maybe others weren't able to do. So yeah, I mean, I tried to be a successful mom, a successful wife, and a successful recruiter. And sometimes some of those things fell short. And unfortunately, the sacrifice was more made with my family. And if I had to do things over again, I wouldn't, I would have probably done things a lot
Yeah.
different, right? Like rank is being dangled in front of your face. And of course you want to succeed. And of course you want to, go up in rank as all military people do.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like a lot of the choices that I made actually kept me stagnant. However, I won in life, right? I
Yeah.
won with a successful marriage. Our girls are doing amazing, but I needed to make choices very early on in my career of what I was willing to do and not willing to do, and I paid the price. It's reflective in my rank. And for a lot of years, Matt, I'm going to be honest with you, I struggled with that. I really struggled with that.
Yeah.
Evals being early promotes, PNAing, meaning pass not advance on your tests, people getting meritoriously promoted over you. And
Mm.
I was always at least 150% to 200% of goal every single month. So I'm working my butt off, right? But it's not reflective in my rank where other people's careers were, they were able to advance with doing less.
Yeah.
So yeah, I struggle with that, which actually propelled me into, I don't want to jump ahead in our questioning, but
No, it's
it
okay.
propelled me, it propelled me into, well, what is within my control at this point, right? Like I said, not to jump all over the place, but I was diagnosed with MS in 2009, and I fought the medical board to stay in. I appealed it twice, and they denied the appeals 2 times. So I I did have enough time in to retire, but I took a medical retirement at 100%, and that sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked. I didn't know, without the hat, wearing the hat of being active duty military, I didn't know how to juggle the full-time hat of being a mom and a wife, right? And in that, I think
Interesting.
you need to go through the grieving process, right? Like all of the stages of a grieving process, not just for my military career, but for my health. I was in
Yeah.
a really bad place, and I didn't know what my future looked like with this diagnosis.
Mm.
And so for a long time, I needed to struggle with that and figure out, like, what was right for my body and how I could handle my future specifically with this disease, not defining me, but how do I balance all of the things, right? It's it was an interesting journey, but in all actuality, it was a gift. Like the
Yeah.
diagnosis was a gift. And I didn't know that then. And I mean, I can confidently say that now because I'm so far removed from the diagnosis and I struggle. I still struggle with MS. But that diagnosis allowed me to take a huge step back and see who I really am as a mom and a wife and a daughter and a friend. And to be able to give my time to that paints such a full picture of me, of what I'm blessed with and how I can balance everything. Like MS gave me the time to do that. Had I not been diagnosed, I don't know. It's so easy to get caught up in your career, right? In your military career.
Yeah.
And I feel like God like plucked me out and it was a hard stop. There was no transition. It was you're in work one day and you're not in work the next day.
It was cold
So
turkey, or like
it was
just
cold turkey.
it was an immediate like.
Yeah. It was cold turkey. So yeah, I don't know, but like I said, in all of that, I was able to rediscover who I was as a wife and a mom and a daughter and a friend and all of that. And I was able to take advantage of the benefits that the VA provides for education, specifically for education, and I did. I took full advantage of that. But everybody dogs the VA for the lack of benefits that they might have, which through some lenses I can understand that, but through
Yeah.
my lens specifically, I don't see that. I was able to seek out information, connect with people who were able to propel me on a different trajectory with my education. And I'm so grateful to the VA and to the benefits that they provided, not only me, but my family.
Yeah,
Um,
you're probably talking about Chapter 35 benefits. So,
yeah,
you know, where
33,
yeah, you
33
get
and
the
35.
33 plus 11, and then so that's kind of like my civilian job. That's kind of like that's what I do. That's my
That's your
subject
jam.
matter expert at the VA. So you're speaking my
Yeah,
language, but yeah, between
yeah,
33 and then Chapter 31, veteran. It's now called VR and E, veteran readiness and employment.
yeah,
And then there's the Chapter 35, which are extended to your dependents when you turn 18. It's actually a really great thing. That what comes to mind is same thing with when that individual who said you're going to have to choose between your career and your family and challenge accepted, right? I think the same thing applies, but in a more, I think, tactful way is with the VA. It's like, okay, yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult understanding. You're drinking water from a fire hose again.
yeah,
Challenge
yeah.
accepted. Just stick with it. Like it's slow and steady. Usually, slow and steady wins the race in
Mhm.
most things in our life. So that's really great to hear. It's great to hear when a challenge like that comes your way, like you said, for you grieve. It's really hard to acknowledge in the moment, but the takeaway is it put me in a position to adapt and to do, like you said, what God intended. What, look, this is what needs to happen. You may not understand it now, but the pieces are going to fall into place. Thank you for sharing that, because that is a very, it's very, I appreciate hearing that part of the journey, because there's so many out there who are going through that journey, who may be listening to this now or had that, to like normalize, and we could relate and like, wow, like that's one thing I open up with the shows, like wherever you're at on your journey, you're not alone.
Yeah,
Depending, and that's what's so great about the veteran community, for us to be able to help each other out in these ways through similar situations, or you know
yeah.
that sort
I
of
agree.
situation. Yeah.
But I do have to say this, like one thing that I see now that maybe I didn't see back then was that we're all responsible. We are all responsible for our choices, right? So the
Hmm.
military is telling me you can't do this anymore, right? And in that moment, I got caught up in the can't. Well, I can't do this and I can't do that. And quite honestly, I was having a pity party for myself,
Yeah.
right? Like all of these things you can't do, not just with medically retiring from the military, but also with my health, right?
Yeah.
You can't do this, you can't do that, all the can't. And I think it took me a couple years to figure out, well, what can I do, right? So leave all those can'ts behind, have a paradigm shift of, well, what can I do? And how can I have a successful, different trajectory in my own
Mm.
life? What can I control? And what I could control was learning about the stages of grief,
Yeah.
learning where I am, learning now how to be not necessarily a better wife and mom, but a different wife and mom than I was when I was on active duty. And when you put all of those pieces together, it's like as positive psychology would say, it's an upward spiral, right? So you
Yeah.
change one thing that propels you on a completely different upward spiral. That one thing will turn into two things, will turn into three things. And now you're just completely on a different trajectory. And I had to come to that realization. But I think accepting what was going on and trying to process through that, I was able to make different choices and just become a better version of myself, quite honestly. But I think if I didn't, acknowledge, like we were talking about before, acknowledging, accepting, processing, and then planning for something different. Um, if you if you can't do that, I think you get tripped up, and you can very easily get tripped up in the, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, and I'm medically retired, so now I'm wearing this weight on my shoulders, right? I think it takes a special person to just like break away from those chains and have a paradigm shift on, well, what can you do? Right? It's like
I,
asking a different type of question.
that is so. I love how you detailed the acknowledge to action. I couldn't have asked for a better way to describe that because it's so awesome how because it starts with the acknowledge. It's almost arguably impossible to do anything if you don't acknowledge because we internalize it. I mean, there's so many different maladaptive coping mechanisms that may prevent us from it, from acknowledging. But when we meet ourselves where we're at in the moment to acknowledge, like you said, that's where it starts. Like, all right, I acknowledged it. What does it mean to accept what is going? Like, you have to accept it, and that's a process. That isn't like, okay, let me get through the next 24 hours, and I'll move on. It's not that streamlined. It could be a lifelong acceptance piece, but your
Yeah.
processing is when you accept, it helps you process, and then you can inventory, and then planning. Sometimes planning can be a little bit overrated as far as like if you make it very structured, but like have a general idea. Okay, as a result of X, Y, and Z, this is what going to your point, this is what I can do. I'm tired of hearing about what I can't do. I get
Mm,
that. You've made it very clear what I can't do. Now it's my turn to say, this is what I am going to do because I want to do
yeah.
it. I need to do it. And all these things that come with empowering ourselves, with acknowledging that from within.
Yeah.
Most of it does lie within, and our
Yeah.
experiences and circumstances. And of course, good mentors help, family members help, spouses help kind of facilitate that and
Yeah.
cultivate that. Absolutely. That's a big part of that. But it starts with what you just said. That's so awesome how you said that. It's like, okay, I got it loud and clear. Copy that. I can't do
Yeah.
this, but I can do. I am, and I can gonna do this. You could either get out of my way, or help me with the process. But I'm proceeding.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think like to close the loop on that, and we've talked about this before, is taking action. And what does taking action look
Yes.
like? Right?
Action. Yes. Yep.
And that's different. That's different for everybody. For
Hmm.
me specifically, with being 100%, and I know a lot of other veterans that are 100% under IU, right? Like under the individual unemployability is the 100%, which restricts you from working. Right. And I understand that I fell into that component with the restriction in having a full-time job, right? MS has its challenges, definitely have my challenges. So it does prevent me from having a full-time 40-hour week, 50-hour week job. And that's fine. But again, well, what can I do under that umbrella? And what I found, I did find Travis Manion Foundation in there somewhere. But what I found was I wanted to be educated more, not
Mm.
just on my health journey, but educated in general, right? And so taking advantage of 33 for me, chapter 33, which in, gave me the availability to finish my undergrad, which I did not finish when I was on active duty. I, right, I had to choose. I was a mom of two young kids. I was a wife. I worked probably 80 hours a week. That's not a lie. I couldn't finish my degree. And in that, like I always thought that within my journey that surely I was going to get my degree and get commissioned.
Mhm.
That was the goal. The goal didn't happen, so I needed to, just make other choices in my life. But what I could control was finishing my degree post military career.
Yeah.
And so the VA enabled me to finish my undergrad, and I went to grad school. I'm actually walking in 2 weeks.
Please
Um,
tell us where, because this is, I know this is I imagine arguably one of the most powerful, I'm saying it wrong,
alma mater.
alma mater. Yeah, yeah, ALM. I see it. Yeah, I'm struggling with saying
Yeah,
it, but
yeah,
so
yeah.
where are you about to finish? Where are you finishing up at?
So I'm finishing up I'm getting my master's in nonprofit management at the University of Notre Dame.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
I
really cool.
really, if somebody told me when I was a kid that I would be graduating from the University of Notre Dame, I would have thought they were absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
Absolutely crazy. But my husband is the one who encouraged me to apply. And I was like, I'll never get in. I'll never get in. Like that voice in the back of your head. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And and yeah, when I was accepted into the program, I was just dumbfounded. And it was such an amazing opportunity for me to be in a cohort with some of the best people on the planet. Right? They're
yeah,
all nonprofit professionals. This is what they do for a living. They're literally changing people's lives. And I don't think that there's anything more powerful than that. Right? So
yeah.
to be in a cohort with these people that I want to influence my life, it's been an amazing journey. And so yeah, I actually degree in hand last July, but I'm walking. I want to walk in
But
grad. I'm walking across the Notre Dame football field.
oh my gosh, well, when we met a few years ago it was at Travis Manion Foundation, and it was like a training we were
Yeah.
doing. One thing that jumped out through conversation, like Notre Dame, I was like, that's cool. It's just something about Notre Dame, and there's probably a handful of schools we could talk about that people are like, oh, Notre Dame, oh, that's cool. So I found that really awesome, and it just really, I was really intrigued by that when I heard that. I was like, Notre Dame. I'm like, oh, she's got a story to tell. Like Connie's got a story to tell.
Well, I
Like,
can tell you this, going back to school in your 50s is not easy.
yeah,
It comes with challenges. Um,
yeah,
but it was an amazing experience, and that was my take action moment. When I had that opportunity, I was humbled, right? But it
yeah,
required a lot of sacrifice. So the program that I'm in required me to be out in South Bend for the summers. I couldn't do that without my husband's support, right? So Chapter 33 coupled with the Yellow Ribbon program paid 100% for my education,
yeah.
undergrad and master's. But what it didn't pay for was the housing that
Family
I needed to.
separation. Yeah.
Yeah, like all of that. So there is some housing when you're going to school full time, as you know. There's a little bit
You
of a
get the
housing.
BH. Yeah.
You get BAH. That does not cover the $5,000 a month to live out in South Bend, right near campus. Something that I could walk to campus with, right?
And not just
Um,
that, you have your home expenses back home where the rest of your
yeah.
family is. So you're managing two households. Yeah. It's
Managing 2 households, and we have 2 girls that were in college at the same time.
wow.
So my oldest daughter and I got our master's degree at the same time,
That's
different
awesome.
schools.
Yeah.
She graduated from Catholic University in DC, and then we have our youngest, who was also in college full time, who was at St. Joe's at the time. So there was a lot of expense coming in, a lot of
Yeah.
expenses. But for my husband being supportive and being the MVP of our family, like he is, it's like, we're going to figure this out. We'll figure it out. And
That's so
again,
nice to
without,
hear. Well, when you hear that from a loved one, even a coworker, we're gonna figure it out. Like
yeah,
that, yeah, that's awesome to hear. I just sorry when you were saying that, that just came to mind. I
yeah,
just wanted to highlight that.
yeah, it's amazing. So in that,
We'll
um,
figure it out.
I got connected to TMF deeper during that
Yeah.
time. Reason being is, well, obviously they're a nonprofit organization, but secondly, I needed a thesis topic. I needed something to research.
Okay.
And I had just been introduced to TMF probably the year before I started grad school. So I had done a couple things with them, but nothing enormous. I knew a little bit about the organization, but not a ton about the organization. And I was offered an opportunity to volunteer with TMF in a different way during the Afghan resettlement efforts.
Wow. Okay.
So TMF sponsored 2 Afghan families, and we're helping them transition, right? They help them move here and transition through this the period of them being in an unfamiliar country and
And being completely displaced like that, but
completely displaced. So what TMF could offer was volunteers to help them assimilate to their new life, right? And the family that I particularly was involved with was a widow with 9 kids.
wow.
And so
Wow.
the husband was slaughtered in front of the whole family for working with the US government. And we owed them the support
Jeez.
coming here. And so all of that to say, I volunteered with Josh Jabin, the COO of TMF.
Hmm.
And so we would see that family quite often. And in that, he knew that I needed a thesis topic to research, and through my whole time in grad school. And so with his help, I wrote a proposal of developing policy and procedure for immigrant families that TMF was partnered with, right? Like nothing was written.
Wow.
And the dean at Notre Dame denied it. she denied
Oh,
it.
geez.
So I needed to figure something else out. The reason being is she said that it was a mission drift from what TMF normally does, which I disagree with, but it was up to her to either approve it or deny it. So I had to
There you are right back. Well, what can I do?
right back to, okay, I
What can
acknowledge that you don't want me to do this. I get it, but what can I
I
do?
do? What can I? Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of like, what can I do? This is just a side note, is asking questions,
Yeah.
right? Asking questions to different people and figuring out a different path. So in that, I asked Josh, like, what would be beneficial for TMF on a whole? Like, what I can give you a whole year of my time of research, being partnered with the best nonprofit organizations in the world, with the best professors in the world. How can I give you this, like, hand you a valuable gift
Mhm.
of cumulatively everybody's time and hand it over at the end? And so he connected me to an opportunity to take the mentorship model of TMF, as you know, with their Character Does Matter program. It's a
Mhm.
group mentorship model. They have got a grant to develop that into a one-on-one mentorship model. And what does that look like? And all of the details and intricacies that go along with one mentor being partnered with a student, coming up with what the student's strengths are, individual strengths, partnering that with the community need, and working through that with the student. So I was able to do research and write about that and pilot it. And it was the most impactful experience of my life. It was
Yeah.
amazing to see how all of those components can change just one person's outlook and one person's trajectory in their life.
Yeah.
And it was just such a gift for me. I know it was a gift for them, but it was also a gift for me to find value in what I'm doing. Like, again, what can I do? I can't go to work for 40, 50 hours a week, but I can be educated and give back my time to be impactful with somebody's life.
That's awesome. That truly is a definition of a win-win situation. Help me, help you. I mean, there's a lot of different variations where we could say that, but it truly was, hey, I'm doing this because it's good for me, and it's equally just as good for you for an organization. And then that touches one, it's a force multiplier.
Yeah.
One person becomes two, two becomes four, and so on and so forth. Excuse me. And because I'm super familiar with Travis Manion Foundation with the Character Does Matter, where we're talking with a group and we do legacy projects and doing group community projects. But that's really awesome to hear how they've got that grant and how you were a critical part of that, building that one-on-one, because that's pretty awesome, because this world needs that. There's a lot of individuals who can, because there's group dynamics that could prevent somebody from really identifying their strength or sharing their strength amongst a group.
Mm,
Whereas one-on-one, you could cultivate that in a different way,
absolutely.
based off the psychology of who we are as individuals, and
Yeah.
then when you build that individual person up, then they're more ready and willing to do the group thing, etc. But sometimes people need the group, and that's the former counselor in me. I used to be a
Yeah.
counselor therapist at the VA, so yeah, there's group dynamics, and some people excel at that, and there's others like, well, nothing. I'm not ready for that. So anyway, that's really awesome to hear. So obviously that is a huge, amazing experience you had that was a critical piece to your transition and readjustment piece. 10 years later down the road, approximately, you give it maybe 10 plus years, and that's how significant, if that's the right word I'm trying to use, what transition could be like. It could be like, all right, I'm getting out, and then, but it could take 10 plus years of active pursuit to really meet yourself where you're at and identify this was the missing piece. This is that's why I like the word journey, because I was like, don't want to do Odyssey, do I want to do, but the journey is I think is so important. It covers such a good time period as far as
Yeah.
how that process is.
And along that journey, people wear different hats, right? So
Yeah.
I baby stepped through the last, say, 13, 14 years, but there were different junctures along the way, right? So I wanted to throw myself into being a good mom and being a good wife. And we're not taught that in school, right? As a counselor, my undergrad's in counseling, but you're not taught that. You're not taught well, hey, how can I be the best spouse I can be? Right?
Yeah.
Without, we're so used to being instinctive with our emotions.
Mm.
And if something gets us mad, then we instinctively react instead of educating ourselves in what a partnership looks like and what sacrifice looks like as a parent, right? Like, and sacrifice doesn't just mean time, like putting time in. It's, hey, we have access to information at our fingertips. Like, our parents didn't have that, right? But you and I can go online and look up some scholarly sources of, well, what does it look like to have a teenage girl in the house and what her struggles are?
Mm.
How can I be more in tune to that? And that, in fact, will make me a better mom, right? Not just my instincts of what I think is going to be a good parent. It's learning about the development of them and their brains and what they struggle with, especially in this day and age, right? We have to take that upon ourselves to educate ourselves on that. And that I think, and quite honestly, I know for me, that made me a better parent. It also made me a better spouse, knowing, hey, we don't have to think alike to be on the same page, right? Like, I can respect Chris and who he is. We might not always think the same,
Yeah.
but learning how to respect somebody else, and male and female brains work very, very differently, and learning about that and knowing about that, that's the recipe to a successful marriage, right?
A successful marriage, successful relationship, that could be applied in so many different aspects of our life. And going back to what you said earlier about, because what you just said was amazing, it is that too. But what I was thinking about what you said a few minutes earlier, how you asked Josh from TMF open-ended questions. Like, okay, this didn't work. And same thing with the relationship. And instead of, like you said, instead of reacting to an emotion, an antecedent, the classic ABCs, antecedent, behavior, consequence.
Right.
Instead of reacting to a prompt, we take pause, we process, and then we proceed as far as, okay. And sometimes that could just be 1 second action.
Mm-hmm.
It can take 1 or 2 seconds to stabilize ourselves, calibrate ourselves, and ask the open-ended question, even internally. Hey, what's going on here? What can I do? How can I do?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that is, whether we want to incorporate positive psychology, emotional intelligence, acknowledge to action, is taking inventory in the moment. And that takes discipline, experience, and all these things that we, like you said, we have access to. I mean, there's coaches out there, there's life coaches, there's this psychology, there's so much out there. And some days quite frankly, it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But when we take a step back and kind of reflect where we're at, it's so helpful for us in the moment, for not only for ourselves individually, but for those we love, we're connected with, and we continue to reinforce those relationships that the return on investment. By no means am I a financial person at all whatsoever. I barely know what a mutual fund is. I don't think I could Well, I could spell it, but it's like ETFs, you know, you got to get on the stock exchange. But
Yeah.
what I do know about investments is slow, steady, conservative is going to give you a return on investment. So if you put X amount in this and, you know, you're not looking for a quick fix overnight, there's the return on investment is going to be invaluable. It's
Yeah.
same thing with emotional investments, family, work, all that stuff, you know, especially with our relationships with ourselves. And I share all that because that's not something I had here written down. That's what's coming as a byproduct of what you shared today, Connie, is, you know, sharing your experience, sharing your journey. That's what's coming to mind, how I'm hearing that, how I'm hearing this. And it's
Yeah.
just really awesome what you're saying, what you shared here today. I mean, we could go on for hours. We could, but I just wanted to take pause, you know, and kind of like process what I was hearing and you know, and acknowledging and putting value in the moment of everything that you're saying today, because that's what this really represents, the power of acknowledged action, you know, by sharing our journeys.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the reasons why I love Travis Manion Foundation so
Yeah.
much. Well, specifically the Character Does Matter program, because we don't we don't learn this stuff in school, right? I mean,
No,
it's
I
not a
mean, yeah.
class. There's no soft skill class or, emotional class or, hey, let's teach you as a 15 or 16-year-old kid what active listening looks like or what social intelligence looks like or emotional intelligence. What I love about the opportunity to go into schools is to be able to plant those little seeds
Yeah.
within a younger generation to hopefully they'll grow over the years, right? Because they have some kind of content to hold on to. Like, wait a second, I don't have to always act by my emotion. Wait, I can take pause or wait, people communicate in different ways. Like I often
Yeah.
go over love languages and the way people receive information is different, but that's
And
super
and it's
valuable.
and to normalize emotions too. Like it's okay to be
Yeah,
angry. Actually
it's okay.
embrace the anger. Just don't act on it. Like then there's a
Right.
difference. Sometimes there's a huge gap between anger and violence. We don't want
Hmm.
anybody to act violently or be on the receiving end. That sucks. That's just terrible. I don't that's not a natural human thing. But anger is normal, and I think if you
It's normal.
acknowledge that, it's if you acknowledge that, hey, I'm angry and that's okay, but this is how I'm in control of it. Like
Right.
this is what it's not doing for me, but this is what I'm going to do to
Hmm.
manage it. And that's that, to speak to your point, that's what's awesome at the Travis Manion Foundation, because we get to go into a variety of different schools, organizations, and settings to that could be the first time they even hear anything like
Yeah,
that. And it
it's
plants that
true.
seed. And in some cases, I know I've been to a couple schools and I've seen the same faces maybe a few times, which is great. But I know, like, all right, I put it out there and it it's in their toolbox now, you know.
Hmm.
But with that individual, I really like the sound of that individual mentor. I'm definitely, we'll talk more later about that, but that's really cool because yeah, I just that's everything the Travis Manion Foundation does and what they represent is just amazing. So I could only imagine how amazing this is and how it's evolving.
It's an amazing opportunity. It's impactful, right?
Yeah.
To see a young kid walk away from this opportunity, that the time that we spend together, which the first pilot was spending about 9.5 months with these young girls. I'm doing the second pilot right now, and we're about 9 weeks in. But to see them embrace their strengths
Hmm.
and know that they have a voice and that they have control over things in their future, to see that on them, it's priceless.
I think that's the power of acceptance. When you start to see that transition, when they start to accept, like acknowledge could come from taking the inventory. Okay, this piece of paper says I'm, you know, I have leadership skills, or you know, I have social
Right.
skills, or I have humor skills. Like what do I tell, a good joke? No, there's a lot actually
Yeah.
that goes. Humor is one of my top ones that
Me too.
and I'm like, yeah, I could crack a joke, you know, but no, it's
Yeah.
so much more than that. But to fully understand that, accept it and process, kind of are so close. It's like, all right. what does that mean to be a leader? Does that mean you just get up in front of people and tell people what to do? No, in fact, that may be just the opposite
The
of what a leader
opposite.
does. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah. So we're definitely gonna have you back on because there's so many side. I'm like I classify myself as a human pinball machine. I'm all over the bang bang bang. I love
That's
ideas, and then but I always end up right back where I started. But
yeah.
in a good way. I say that in a good way. But um, that's great. So there's another thing I'd like for you to highlight and share because I think it's super awesome. Because I don't know if it happened between our last conversation and now, or it just wasn't talked about, or it was in progress. I think I'm going to say, are you part of a leadership development cohort with Travis Manion Foundation now? Is
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that, and then we could
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I know a little bit because I'm part of cohort 6 with the Spartan Leadership
That's
Program.
what it's
So
cohort. Okay, all right.
yeah, it's a Spartan Leadership Program. So it's a 7-month journey within a cohort model of deep diving with positive psychology and really finding out who you are personally, not just within the TMF model, but apart from the TMF model, right? Like, how do we? And it's veterans and families of the fallen that are in this cohort, and
Okay.
they only take a certain amount of people for each cohort. It's a huge investment on TMF's part. There's traveling, traveling expenses, food expenses. Just putting together the curriculum for this model, this Spartan Leadership Program model, and I'm humbled that I was even chosen, and I appreciate their very generous class, this leadership class that I'm a part of, and the expense doesn't go unnoticed. It's very they're investing in us
Yeah.
um, to learn more about who we are, and like I said, it's a lot of deep diving as far as I can tell. So the kickoff was just in Charlotte last week, so this is all still kind of new. The cohort got to meet each other. We got to meet the some of the teachers that we're going to have through this journey. They set clear expectations of doing the work, and one thing I love about this, and I think it can apply to basically anything in life, is it's up to you to do the work,
Hmm.
right? So the work is out there. Some of it can be easily overlooked, right? Whether it's meditating and taking that moment to yourself every single day, and thinking about things that you have gratitude for, looking at everything that's around you. It's all part of the journey. Things like that can be easily overlooked, like, I don't need to do a gratitude journal, or I don't need to do meditation, right? But one thing they stress is do the work. It's going to
Yeah.
pay off. They're pieces to the full puzzle. And if you don't do one piece because you kind of poo-poo it, like you don't need it, well, then the whole model doesn't work right. Right. So just showing up and doing the work, I think, is a huge takeaway from the ask of the investment of this Spartan Leadership Program.
Interesting. I like what you just said, to show up and do the work. I think if everybody did that in whatever organization they're a part of, wow. It sounds simple, but it's not.
But it's not. It's
Yeah.
not. And especially with veterans, I have to say, I did not expect to be. I'm not typically an emotional person, and I know that part of this, the cohorts that I know people have done in the past with the Spartan Leadership, they all say the same thing. You got to put your whole self into it. You got to get to know people. You
Mm,
got to do the work, and I'm all for that. When it comes to sharing my emotions, that's not my strong suit. So I had to go in with the thought process of, I need to be vulnerable, right? And that's hard. That's hard for a lot of people. I think it's specifically hard for veterans, right? Because you want to put on this strong persona of you're constantly in control of who you are and your emotions, right? So when you're groomed that way, it's hard to just shake that off and look at things through a different lens. And when we went to Charlotte, I'm like, I'm good. I can appreciate the emotion in other people, but that's just not me. And they came around the table to my turn to share, and I lost it. I just
yeah.
lost it. And I
Yeah.
thought, wait, why did I just say that? Why did I just
Yeah.
like shed tears about that? And it was really my MS story that I told you earlier. You
Yeah.
know, and it's a story that I've told a million times. It's one that I typically don't put emotion onto because
Hmm.
I'm good. I'm good with where I am. But there was something special about the environment, and there was something special about being
Interesting.
vulnerable to build this cohort, to build the team, to build trust, right? And vulnerability, I do think it's equated with trust in some
Yeah, absolutely.
specific environments. And it was one of the pieces that I walked in there with, well, I'm not really ready to do that. And then all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't even get through the MS story without crying. It was crazy.
Wow.
But in that experience, I think our cohort got very close in a very short amount of time. And when
Yeah.
you're willing to do that and willing to put in the work, it can make for a very special experience. And I'm looking forward to the next 7 months on this journey. So when you ask for me to speak about it a little, I know a little bit about it, but it's very, very new. So we'll talk in 7 months.
Yeah, no, that's great because I know it's all when you're public or social media feeds, you put it out there. So that's why I asked. I was like, because I was curious and all that. So I hope you didn't mind me asking you. I hope
No,
it
no,
didn't
not
put
at
you on the
all.
spot. But that was
No.
that. Yeah, it was definitely something I wanted to highlight and share. But there's so many great takeaway points here today, Connie. I mean, we could go on and on, but something that came, one last kind of thought I want to share. So just bear with me here for a second. So, what's your favorite number?
4.
4. Okay, that's a good, easy number. I won't mess this up.
Okay.
Think of 4, like, and it just seriously, this just came to mind when what we just thought about emotions, right? So some of us compartmentalize it a little better than others. Some are wear emotions on the sleeve, right? So,
Mhm.
and it's a pretty broad spectrum, right? But let's take emotion as the number 4. What's one equation to get to number 4? Like what comes to mind?
2 plus 2.
Okay, so that's just one way. But think, how many ways are there to get to 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 1 plus 3. I mean, and then you start getting decimals. I mean, we'll be here forever. It's infinite.
Yeah.
I think that's what emotion is. And there's a lot of different ways. If we're a 2 plus 2, 4, great, straightforward. That's okay. If that's what works, that's okay. But if we're a little more detailed, then 0.1 plus 0 would be. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just how I was thinking about emotion and how dynamic it could be. Like 4, just that's super easy. No, 4, yeah, maybe a straightforward number, right? Real easy number, but there's so many layers that could be involved with it. I think that's with our emotions too. We
Yeah, I
could be
agree.
some days it could be a 2 plus 2 days. Other days it could be hundreds of integers or variables that factor into what 4 represents.
Yeah, I agree
I
with
don't,
that.
I don't know. It's just what I just wanted to share that my undergrad is in philosophy. So I always love going down those rabbit holes. And then I got
Yeah.
my graduate degree in psychology and counseling. So it's some days I can't help it.
Yeah. It's
So,
okay. It's all
but
right.
it helps. But I need the input. I need the data to be able to share that. So with that said, thank you, Connie. Seriously, do you have any parting words for us? Is there a message you'd like to leave us with our listeners and how they could navigate their own paths, both within and beyond the military, or wherever they're at on their journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I could summarize it in, so there's a book called A More Beautiful Question. I don't know if you ever read it, and I can't think of the author off the top of my head, but it's essentially, um, how do you ask a more beautiful question when you get to a wall, right? And it's like we
Hmm.
we talked about earlier, right? You can't do this, Connie. You can't do that, and like the gloom and doom that come with a diagnosis. Who is that? Oh, like my window's open and they're constructing next door. Like, what is that? But I think my parting words would probably be ask a more beautiful question. If you have a goal,
Mm,
well, how do you identify a goal to move forward in your life? And it might just be in little tiny baby increments, right? I mean, not everybody's goal is to get a master's degree from Notre Dame, right? Um, Maybe your goal is to wake up and get out of the house and get some
yeah.
sunshine, right? And those baby steps and that upward spiral that we were talking about within the
Hmm.
positive psychology model is real. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to, well, what does that look like for you? right? It doesn't need to be something huge and grandeur, like changing the world, but how can maybe I be accountable for my own actions? We all get 24 hours in a day, and it could be something as small as getting out of bed and getting some sunshine, or it could be as large as, getting a PhD. I don't know, and everything in between. But I would encourage people, not to compare, right? My journey doesn't need to look like somebody else's journey. It surely doesn't need to look like everything we see on social media, right?
Yes.
But how do we talk about just what's in our own brains and acknowledge what we need to do to live a healthy life? And everybody's journey is different. Everybody's baby steps will look different. But I also encourage a more beautiful question, right? Like,
More beautiful
if I am
question.
crippled and can't get out of bed, well, how can I, right? Even just start with that question. Who can I reach out to? How can I reach my goal? And a lot of that is just seeking information and and connecting those dots, connecting those puzzle pieces, and everybody's journey is different.
That's awesome. That is really awesome, and I can't think of a better way to summarize our conversation today and ask that beautiful question internally. It starts with the self. What can I do? How am I feeling today? Instead of fixating on, oh, I can't do this and stating the obvious in some circumstances. I mean, that's probably trivializing some things, but it's like, okay, this is the reality of my situation, but what can I do? What do I want to do? How can I do that? And then
Mhm.
it goes to that upward trajectory, that upwards positive spiral you referenced earlier. I think that's awesome. It starts with that acknowledgement piece. It really does. So thank you, Connie. This is awesome. You are awesome. Your journey is
Aw,
amazing.
thanks, Matt.
Seriously, like I've been really looking forward to this. I appreciate our connection over the years. I appreciate our relationship with Travis Manion Foundation, how that's going to continue to evolve, and just now having you as an official guest here on the Acknowledge to Action. It's huge for the show. It means a lot to me. So thank you.
Well,
Seriously.
thank you for
Mm.
offering. It's kind of cathartic for me to
Yeah.
walk through the journey, and specifically being with this Spartan Leadership Program. A lot of this is through a lens of gratitude, and how I look back on my military career. And for years I was really, just I beat myself up over the lack of rank that I ended with. And a lot of that was, I feel like I needed to explain myself when people would say, "Oh, what did you
Yeah.
retire? You did 20 years. What did you retire as?" And, I felt this sense of burden, like, well, if I tell you, then I have to explain all of this. And quite honestly, that's not the truth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but I know that now. I know that now. I didn't understand that then. And that's all part of the journey with you asking me questions and going through my testimonial and just what I have experienced through my journey. It really helps me with the gratitude that I take away. So I appreciate you having me on the show and having me go through some memories, walking down memory lane with everything. It helps me specifically with this Travis Manion program.
Well, that's awesome. This is a win-win situation. I'm glad it was good for you. It was good for me. It was good for the show. Good for our listeners. So thanks. I got one more question for you,
Okay.
and I love all these questions, but this particular one is I always look forward to this one. As our guests grow, so does our song list. So
Okay.
we have an Acknowledge to Action playlist that's accessible on Spotify. What song do you want to dedicate to the Acknowledge to Action playlist?
So I was thinking about that.
Okay.
And there's so many of them,
Yeah.
right? Like there's so many great songs, but what my takeaway from that question when I was thinking about this interview,
Mhm.
I think it's got to be Unwritten. And is that Natasha Bedingfield or something like that? I think it's Natasha Bedingfield.
I remember her CD came out like 10, 12. That's like this.
Yeah,
I remember the
it's an
name from like
older
12.
song.
But it was a good, but I know I'm getting older too because that still feels like a new, even though
Yeah.
it's like, but no. So, okay. So Natasha Bedingfield, Unwritten.
Natasha Bedingfield, I think it's Natasha Bedingfield, and it's called Unwritten. And what I love metaphorically about this is, without sounding too corny, wherever you are in your life, right? What is unwritten? Like, what can you write today
Mm,
that you can implement this afternoon or tomorrow? And like I said, that looks different for everybody, right? Does that mean I take one less meeting in the afternoon so I can go home at dinner time and spend that with my family, right? Like, what are you writing for your future and how are you going to implement it? And that's why, like, I love that song. I think
that's cool.
metaphorically and literally, right? How do you implement something like that in your life instead of getting like bogged down with all of the negativity and maybe choices that you made in your life? Like, how do you move forward away from that? And I don't know. That's why I love the song.
That's what I love about the playlist. Sometimes, a couple gets, it's like, no, it's a cool song. Cool. Others, because music to me is the universal language, and
Yeah, I
it
agree.
could help, it could help detail what we're thinking, feeling. So if we're feeling, like, go back to the number 4, that music could be an important, integer in that. Like, I don't have the
Absolutely.
words or feeling, but this song kind of does it for me, nails it.
It
So,
does it for me. Yeah.
well, that's awesome. On that note, thank you again, Connie. I look forward to staying connected with you. You're always welcome here back as the show evolves. So we can have multiple guests, multiple hosts, multiple. There's no limit. It's only going to evolve and get better. So
I love it. I
and
love it.
you're a critical component of that. You're making good, better, best. Never rest till your good is better and your better is best, right? So
It's better
every
at best.
day gets a little bit better, right? So thank you.
Well, I just have to call you out for
Okay.
juggling this, right? Like you're juggling being a dad, being a husband, deploying for different things
Yeah.
in your life, right? Things in your career, and to be able to prioritize this for the betterment of others is applaudable. And I appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I try not to, like, I'm always acknowledge and receptive of the acknowledgement piece of that, especially when guests bring it up. So, but this is, I mean, every episode is special to me. Every episode is important, but this one in particular, where I'm at in the world, we're 10 hours apart, or no, we're 7 hours apart because you're on East Coast time. So we're 7 hours away. So that just puts it in context how far apart I am and what I'm doing. And it was a short activation, and I'll share more of context either on the front end of the intro that I do, or the outro, or put it in the written word. In addition to everything else we talked about today, uh, we're starting a book list as well. In addition to the music and the book list, and links to the Travis Manion Foundation too. So it's a good access point. It's a hub as
That's
well.
awesome.
So thank you for highlighting that. I appreciate that. I
Yeah,
acknowledge that, and I appreciate that. Um,
absolutely.
so,
Absolutely.
um,
Well, I'm so
um,
happy to talk with you and connect with you. And I know that we'll talk again soon.
absolutely, Connie. So thanks again. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to episode 10 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. Today, we explored Connie Whalen's remarkable military journey and personal growth. We discussed the importance of family support, the work-life balance, and sustaining a military career, as well as the unique camaraderie found in the military and through organizations like the Travis Manion Foundation. Connie shared insights into challenges faced as a woman in a predominantly male career and the sacrifices working mothers make. Her story emphasizes the value of embracing change and pursuing education for personal and professional growth, including utilizing VA benefits. We also examine the broader theme of sacrifice in parenting and relationships, emphasizing the power of empathy and open-ended questioning. Connie's experiences with the Travis Manion Foundation and the Spartan Leadership Program highlight the transformative impact of community involvement, helping others, positive psychology, and intentional personal growth. Join us next time for inspiring stories on Acknowledge to Action. And check out the Acknowledge to Action playlist on Spotify featuring songs dedicated by our guests, symbolizing the unwritten journeys we all embrace. Remember, wherever you are on your journey, you are not alone. Until next time.